What do you mean my engine coolant is low? In this episode of Aston1936.com, I'm going to show you how to change the engine coolant level sensor. So I had an experience in my car. I was driving one day and I got a warning message on my dash that said, warning, low coolant level.
Engine coolant level low? What the f***?
You know, I basically got home, let the car cool off, and I went over and I checked the coolant reservoir thinking it would be low. And I had a look in here, and lo and behold, it was full. And I was like, okay, that's weird. So I went and I restarted the car, and I still had the level sensor warning. So I went online and I Googled a little bit. This isn't a completely unique experience. Essentially, nestled in the bottom of this plastic tank, which is the coolant reservoir, is this sensor. And it pokes into the bottom of the tank, and it basically measures if there's coolant at least to the top of the sensor tip. And as soon as the water level's getting lower and lower, it sets off the alarm. But like any sensor, this thing can go bad. But I didn't realize how this worked yet. I thought, well, maybe there's a float or something in there. So, you know, I took the cap off and I got in there, you know, with a plastic stick, and I kind of, you know, scooched around thinking maybe there'd be some crud built up and it was holding the float down. That didn't really change anything. So I've ordered myself a replacement sensor, and we're going to go ahead and I'm going to show you how to change this sucker out. So there's a few prerequisites that you're going to have to pull off first. Right now, this reservoir is full of coolant. So you might want to check out my other video on how to drain the engine coolant. Now, you don't necessarily need to drain the entire cooling system. You have to at least, you know, drain the coolant level out to empty out this chamber. Now, this plastic tank is about 6 or 7 inches tall. So you can either drain the radiator properly like I show in my video. You could maybe try to get in here with a turkey baster or some other sort of suction device and suck out the coolant that's in here. Now, this process also can't be done from the top. The sensor is buried on the bottom of this tank, and there's structural braces and all sorts of hoses. So we're actually going to do the work through the wheel arch here. So as the cameraman will show you, we've basically got the car up off the ground. You could do this just by jacking up the one corner. And then I've removed the road wheel. And then you'll also see that I've removed the inner fender liner. So now I can actually get access, and we'll get in a little closer here in a second, to the bottom of the tank because the fender liner's out of the way. So it's way easier to go in this route. So you can check out all my other videos on how to get it off the ground, get the wheel off, and get the wheel arch liner out. So let's go over into the bench and talk about the parts and tools we're going to need first. So let's talk about the tools and the parts. So we only need one part. I ordered this from Aston Martin. It was about $61. I will tell you that this is not a bespoke Aston Martin part. I believe you can find this in the aftermarket world. And maybe in my companion blog article, I'll have a link to a non-Aston supplied one that might be closer to 20 bucks. I think this was used in several Jaguars and other European cars. So you'll need one of those. And we only need a couple of tools. Basically, we just need a couple of small flat blade screwdrivers to pry the sensor out of the bottom of the tank. And then an inspection light's always a handy tool to have while we're doing this. And you might want to have a couple of shop rags or paper towels around in case there's a few drips of coolant that come out when you pull the sensor. So let's take a look at, this is the bottom of the tank. And here's our actual sensor. And there's the electrical connector with a yellow and a red wire connecting up to the sensor. So the first step is going to be to remove the connector. And this is one of these pretty easy to do ones. There's a little metal bar that you squash up. So you push the bar up as far as it can go, and then you pull the connection back off. And then you'll see here in the shot on, if I give you the end view, you can see how that releases the clips. So that's pretty easy to get that out of the way. So here's our sensor. Now it's kind of retained in two ways. It's got these there's a couple little plastic tabs that hang down to grip it on the front edge. And then there's also these sort of little fingers up in the actual bottom of the tank that reach down and grip a little ring that's on it. So we're going to focus on getting these two plastic tabs spread so we can pull the sensor down the first part. And my experience has been that this will just pop right out. The second part just pops out at the time. So getting those little tabs to flex out of the way while you're simultaneously trying to pull the unit down is a bit of a trick. And I found that if I get in just a little bit with one screwdriver under the edge of the tab and lean it back while I maybe try to pry down. Well, let's see if I can do that a little better with this one. Okay, so I've kind of got that one over the edge of it. Now I'm going to try to pry the other one back without breaking anything off. It's all freaky sounding. There we go. So here's our old sensor, and you can see it's discolored. It's more yellow, probably from sitting in the tank for years or whatever. But that's all there is to get it out. And now we can see that, there's this hanging set of clips. That's all it was gripping onto the front. And then we have this little ridge around here that inserts into all these little plastic fingers. Around the bottom of the opening. And these really weren't a big deal. And fortunately for me, my tank was completely dry, so nothing's coming out here. So putting in the new sensor is pretty easy. So there's really no preparation for it. I'm just going to take it, seat it into place, and now I'm going to kind of do it in one solid push. And I've made sure at the back I have that ring lip completely up in those little plastic teeth, so it's gone all the way up and it's flush. And obviously I'm solidly in on these front two clips as well. You don't want the ring to be butting up against the bottom of those clips. You want to make sure you're all the way up through them and it's up against the bottom of the reservoir. So now it's really just a matter of connecting up the electrical connector, making sure, give it a tug back, and we're in good shape there. We've got the sensor swapped out. Well, that wasn't very hard. It only took us a couple of minutes to change out the sensor once we had all the preamble work done. Now, some advice here. I would go ahead and properly refill your cooling system up to the proper level. So check out my other video on how to do that here, because we want to get the coolant back into it, and we want to check that we don't have a leak. And then with the coolant back in the car, we also want to start and run the car and make sure your error message is cleared, because maybe the problem wasn't the sensor, it might have been the wiring or something else. So before we go and put all this stuff back together again, you absolutely want to make sure your problem is cleared up. If it is cleared up, well, then you can go ahead and reinstall the fender liner, put the road wheel back on, torque the wheel nuts, and then get the car off the jack stand or off the jack back on the ground. I'll have links to all those videos on how to do that up here. So that wraps it up. Down here you'll find my companion blog article. I'll have a link to where you can find the sensors, maybe the generic one as well, and the other articles on how to do all the prerequisite work. Up here, I'm certain you'll find the video for how to refill the cooling system. If you like to see videos like this, please go ahead and subscribe down here, and you'll get automatically notified when a new video comes out. And as always, I love to hear your comments. Please leave those down below. Thanks for watching.